Today, I want to tackle the topic of toxic masculinity. We are all guys here, and we get to take our own perspectives and tell the world what
are we trying? Can I just say, are we trying to get laid through this?
Also, what is toxic masculinity?
I have a real definition of it.
Okay, so
I hear it a lot.
I don't know because Tiff's not here, so I'm not sure.
I hear this phrase a lot, but I don't really know what that means.
Toxic masculinity is defined by adherence to traditional male gender roles that consequently stigmatize and limit the emotions boys and men may comfortably express while statusing other emotions such as anger. Now, that's very fucking vague.
Yes.
So I went ahead and went through some articles, and basically they're trying to define what this is. And one person, or this person who wrote this, defines is as a toxic masculinity is a narrow and repressive description of manhood, designating manhood as defined by violence, sex, status, and aggression. It's the cultural ideal of manliness, where strength is everything while emotions are weakness, where sex and brutality are yardsticks by which men are measured, while supposedly feminine traits, which can range from emotional vulnerability to simply not being hypersexual, are the means by which your status as a man can be taken away.
Is this so? Since it's toxic masculinity, who are the victims of it? It could be women and men.
For sure, it could be women.
Well, in this article, they were saying that it's not a war on men necessarily, but
That's what it sounds like.
yeah, it sounds like that. But it's basically like saying discussing toxic masculinity, not saying that men are bad or evil. And the term is not an assertion that men are naturally violent. In fact, this conversation was started by men. So it was inspired by a feminist movement that had done. It says it wasn't started by men.
Right, it wasn't started by men.
Wait. No. It was started by men. Sorry. The conversation was started by men. Jason Katz's TED Talk on the subject is a useful starting point.
So if your girlfriend's yelling at you, could she be exhibiting toxic masculinity too?
Or could we call it toxic femininity?
If she's telling you as a man to minimize your emotions because you're a man, then I think so.
Yeah, so it's a school of thought. Yeah. It can be perpetuated by both males and females.
I see.
And generally, what I took from the small research that I did is anyone that is a part of this school of thought and thinking is a part of toxic masculinity. So you could be a mother telling your son like, "Hey, don't be a bitch.
Yeah.
Don't be girly.
Stop playing with dolls."
But don't be a bitch is such an unfair. I don't know, man. Because to me, don't be a bitch doesn't mean like don't express yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just means don't be a bitch.
Yeah, don't be a coward.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it means to me.
Like don't be toppled by little obstacles.
Right.
Is what I get from
some people.
But I think it also depends on the context in
Of
which that was
course.
given to that person. Because I think some people, like when they're being told, "Hey, don't be a bitch" or whatever, it does relate to their feelings. But that isn't everyone.
But that's why when we generalize things like toxic masculinity, it sounds like an epidemic that's happening to everybody.
Right. I don't like terms like that because I do. You know what? It's like this. Like it's not like I'm gonna go ahead and disagree that things like that exist. Yeah. But when you create these blanket statements, you create a boogeyman situation where you're like, that sounds like toxic masculinity.
Hey, you know what it sounds like to me? The gay agenda.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same shit to me.
Yeah.
It's the same shit.
Yeah, and I don't know, like then it's difficult to define because now it's like, what is this? Like for example, another thing would be racism, right? Some people believe that it doesn't really exist and some people believe that it does or whatever. But then it's easier to objectively define what racism is and you can battle it out in court. Like, was this a hate crime? Was this a racist act, right? But with toxic masculinity, I don't think you can really define clearly, objectively, and it can't hold up in court.
Yeah, well, it also depends on like how they're using it too. Like, it's not all masculine things are necessarily bad by definition.
But that's why they put the word toxic.
Right. So then, but then I feel like the people that are using that term sometimes use it as a blanket statement for all of like masculine feature.
Context-wise, that's the mostly what I see it as.
Yeah.
It's like it's a misappropriation of that word.
But I would still agree with like the original assertion, which is that like there's certain like cultural things that like as men we are told like, hey, don't deal with your feelings.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And you could take something too far always.
Because when I hear toxic masculinity, it almost sounds like you're too much of a breadwinner. And I'm like, what? That's like a weird word in general to me.
You're too much of a friend.
If I ever said like don't be a bitch to anyone, it's never about their feelings. Like if someone is coming to me and they're crying, I'm never gonna dismiss their feelings. If I ever said don't be a bitch to someone or even to myself, it's usually an obstacle that I kind of look through with a magnifying glass, and it's actually not that big of a deal, and I need to like.
It depends, because if somebody come to me and they're crying, and they're crying because they took off their VR headset and their hair like hurt them, then yeah, I'm gonna laugh about it. But if it's like I'm crying because something just happened that's serious, it's different.
Yeah.
So there is a funny side to everything.
Yeah, but we're also around a lot of intelligent guys that also respect women, right? Like, so for example, I think, like both Tiff and Gio have said that when they're walking the streets in Mexico, they get constantly catcalled, and it's very different from, maybe,
or even the streets of East LA, actually.
Right. So it's way more frequent, maybe in that culture, to be openly like sexually aggressive, right? So I think that's what they're more so talking about, is that machismo, masculine culture, maybe. Well, that's not even masculinity to me, because masculinity.
That's just being a predator.
Yeah, you're protecting women.
You're supposed to be protecting, yes.
That's what masculinity is. So
But they're saying the toxic masculinity, right? So it's like this is the baddest version of masculinity, where you're literally telling other dudes to shut the fuck up about their feelings, and you're telling chicks that they're just
putting other people down for being in touch with like emotions and whatnot.
Right. But what ends up happening is that I think it's like you group all men, and we get hit in the crossfire, and it's like you guys are like this, and it's like wait, hold on, I'm not a part of that group, right?
Or dude, I mean, remember the rape culture stuff on campuses where everyone said like that the Duke lacrosse team raped a bunch of chicks, and they didn't. Like they all got like in court that was found to be not true, but the media made this big fucking thing with the Duke lacrosse team was a bunch of rape culture guys, and like they're all slapping five about how they raped some girl, and like none of that gets reported on later where it's like, hey, this didn't happen. It's just like everyone in the movement just kind of moves on because it's not part of their excuse for why men suck. So, or women suck, right? Same shit. So this whole idea that like you can just generalize a group, that's the problem that I think.
I think so too, because what ends up happening is people obviously are growing up in shitty situations, right? Like maybe they have shitty father figures or men around them, and then they finally stand up and they go, the world's full of shitty men, not realizing, hey, maybe your family and your situation was fucked up. Not everyone has shitty role models growing up, right? And I think that's what people are doing, is though they're reacting to anecdotally like what happened to them personally, and they go, the world has shitty men.
Well, I mean that's pretty. I feel like that's pretty natural for a lot of people. It's because if you've had bad experiences like that, then yeah, it's gonna skew your worldview. Just like how we have all collectively our own bad experiences, maybe one particular group that like kind of makes us, a little bit skewed towards that.
Yeah, but the goal is to be more intelligent.
Oh yeah, totally.
Humans, right? So, but when we have these terms of toxic masculinity or whatever, we stoop right back down.
I guess I'm just empathizing with where that feeling comes from, but I don't think it necessarily works as a blanket statement. But I think that like to understand why someone would reach that conclusion, like I get it.
But you know what?
Provides insight.
You know what I think is kind of fucked up is how we generalize people in categories where like so for example, I'm very good emotionally at analyzing situations, and some people say, including my own group of friends sometimes, they say that I have feminine energy because I'm able to diagnose emotional situations.
Because you have
and that's part of what's bullshit about our group of people in the world, where everyone's like, if you are able to diagnose something emotionally, that's considered feminine.
If you have any touch of emotion, it makes you feminine.
Right. Why can't it be masculine to do that?
Is alpha males, or males that are on a higher totem pole of the hierarchy in the animal system and in the human system, right? They actually possess empathy, because with empathy, they can read their team, their tribe, and they can hit the problem areas and work socially to make sure that the team stays high in morale and things like that. So being able to read emotions is actually a very high skill for a leader to have.
Right, but we are not chimpanzees. We are men. And so the idea that a man who's able to diagnose something does not make him a chimpanzee. It makes him a man, I think. And so the idea that masculinity can be categorized such a way where like, hey, if you're able to emotionally evaluate a situation that's not manly is fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I think toxic masculinity actually is. It's like,
Men can't possess the traits of this.
you're not able to do that. Men can't communicate like that. Men are too fucking brawny and fucking we punch walls too much.
What about men that wear eyeliner? Is that okay?
No.
Oh, okay.
Unless you're in a pirate movie.
Oh yeah, then you're...
And then it's actually very sexy.
Have you heard of the theory of the warrior farmer?
No.
So I was listening to this podcast of a male feminist, and I think he wrote a book on all this stuff. But
He's like male feminism. How I used a movement to get really fucking laid.
by girls with armpit hair.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought this was fucking interesting, right? Because in academics they try to go through like biological characteristics and societal and cultural to answer why our society is like this. And one of the theories that backs this up is the idea of women are actually, they have the freedom to express and explore humanity better than men because men had to
Historically.
because
Right.
men had to go to war, so then you had to train men
Or
to
they're
have
hunting.
or to have less empathy. So just as evolutionary and maybe even culturally, we were taught to kill. If you're always crying about the animals and the people that you're killing, you're not going to make a really good killer.
And you're not going to be efficient.
Right. So, but for us, we had to be a farmer, and then we also, so we're in society and we're working and we're normal, like non-violent human beings. But when it's time to protect and go to war, we have to turn that on.
Right.
Whereas women always had the luxury, or not the luxury, but the ability to stay protected and be a human being and a nurturer. So their color palette of expressing emotions and reading emotions got to develop. Because also they were the nurturers of our society. So they had to read what a baby needs without speaking.
Right, and they had the benefit of Cosmopolitan magazine, Mary Claire. All the things that men don't have
Vanity
access
Fair. Yeah.
We can't get these sorts of periodicals. Like, we don't have the means to do that. And so that's part of what's really fucked up.
The cavemen back then reading. Well, that's one of the things, right? Is that they're saying that they had they have that time with the baby, and they have the hours of training and the nonverbal communication even amongst themselves. And then men, on the other hand, we go out and we have to grab food and we have to kill. And we have to be more like evolutionary that way. So when we came back, we weren't able to communicate and read emotions at the level that they were able to.
And now that our society has kind of shifted to where we don't really have to hunt like that anymore or wars because of tech, and tech kind of is a great equalizer.
Yeah.
Now we have these kind of conversations now about like, hey, that those roles don't really apply so much in this modern society.
But now if you're a man, imagine the pressure. You have to be like Ryan Reynolds. You have to be almost hairless.
Yeah.
And ripped.
Almost here.
And let's talk about the unrealistic expectations of men.
Thank you.
With fucking, do you know how hard it is to get a six-pack?
Oh my God.
You know how hard it is to make 30% more?
Thank you. Nobody says it.
I would love to be a stay-at-home dad, man.
Yeah.